Homelessness. Individual versus institutional. Within all the research that has been conducted in the area of homelessness, there have been two recurring themes. The first is a belief in the cause of homelessness due to individual causes. The second is examining homelessness as a cause of institutional failings. Along with individual institutional follows the ideologies of deserving or undeserving. If the cause of homelessness is seen to be a result of individual causes, the person is often deemed to be deserving of their current state of homelessness. However, if they are homeless because of institutional reasons, then they are assumed to be undeserving of being without a home. Individualization is the cause of homelessness. Focusing on individuals as the reason for homelessness is a victim-blaming approach to the problem. This approach posits that those who are homeless are so as a result of their own personal problems which have created the situation that they find themselves in. Hastings summarizes it as, people are homeless because of personal traits and attributes over which they have little control, or they are responsible for their homelessness because of poor behaviors and bad choices. Individual causes of homelessness are often attributed to personal struggles such as mental health issues, drug and alcohol addiction, and varying forms of abuse. Individualized deviancy thus becomes normalized, as do inadequacies of social and economic distribution. This is identified by Kingfisher in her examination of homelessness in a small Alberta town. This is precisely the situation in Woodridge, where the history of Native-non-Native relations, a history marked by segregation and oppression, is erased, and the negative repercussions of the current political economy are eclipsed by valorizations of neoliberal individuality. In this ahistorical, asocial frame, the problem of homelessness is reduced to the individual traits of essentialized and essentially dysfunctional Native men. Responses to homelessness are often minimal and punitive in nature. Individuals themselves are seen as being responsible and engaging in deviant acts that lead them into homelessness, as they are not acting or engaging in behaviors expected of them. As homelessness is considered to be brought on by the individual, there is little concern among government or policymakers on assistance. However, this reasoning of homelessness results in policies that criminalize homelessness in an attempt to change the deviant choices people who are homeless make. Homelessness services, focusing on the individual aspect, are seen to be criticized as they are designed to treat the deviant behaviors the homeless are engaging in. Tactics such as police sweeps, pushing homeless people into hazardous or less desirable areas, opens them up to more problems such as hazardous environmental exposure. Anti-housing policing involving recurrent fines, citations, move-along orders, and seizure of belongings ensures a state of ever-present instability for houseless people. Lack of access to adequate infrastructure and services, including shelter itself, as well as stormwater management systems, water and sanitation infrastructure, electricity, and other basic services that usually accompany stable housing, exacerbates environmental hazard exposure. Institutional failings is the cause of homelessness. An institutional or structural examination of homelessness looks past the individual as the root cause of homelessness. It is a somewhat simpler explanation than the individual ones. This explanation of the root cause of homelessness looks at social structures such as housing, workforce, and poverty as the reasons for the homelessness issue. Hastings writes that structural or institutional factors are organized patterns of social relationships and social institutions that are both persuasive and enduring. Homelessness is seen as a result of capitalistic reductions in fundings to systems such as welfare. People are deemed to be completely powerless against such social institutions. What are the issues raised by critical scholars about traditional approaches to homelessness? A not-in-my-backyard mentality, otherwise known as NIMBYism, has taken a hold of Canadian practices in regards to helping the population of individuals experiencing homelessness within our country. NIMBY is described as the opposition to the locating of something considered undesirable in one's neighborhood. Corianne Scully describes NIMBYism in her article, The Nuances of NIMBY, Context and Perceptions of Affordable Rental Housing Development, as being broken down into two distinct parts, an attitude having a personal bias and an institutionalized action. NIMBYism has gained traction within Canada and can be described in relation to these two distinct parts. Examples of a NIMBY mentality at the individual level look like communities stating reasons against homeless shelters such as declining property values, increased traffic, increased crime, and unfair distribution of social services. However, Wynne Edwards further explains that these objections often mask underlying issues and fears that are the actual reasons are driven by an individual's lack of knowledge or understanding, their fear of change, and their fear of their perceived threat homeless shelters in their community pose. She then further explains that in the case of homelessness, the prevalence of NIMBY opposition is heightened due to bias, bigotry, and prejudice against homeless people due to stereotyped notions of who homeless people are. An example of community members displaying personal bias against individuals experiencing homelessness is brought to light in Raising the Roof's campaign that advocates for long-term housing solutions. In 2015, Raising the Roof confronted NIMBYism within Toronto by placing a sign on an abandoned building in the Leaside neighborhood, stating it was being converted into a homeless shelter. Calls were then recorded with the responses of concerned community members, with many voicing complaints about the neighborhood's new shelter. Within the video, which was later released on YouTube, community members can be heard making statements such as, "I just got a notice about the new shelter going into my neighborhood, and I think it's an awful idea. There must be some other place where a homeless shelter could be opened up. Let's move them somewhere down south or up north. I don't know what this is going to do to the real estate value. I'm a very tolerant person, but this is really just going over the edge. You know that these are all drug addicts and drunks. You're ruining a perfectly good neighborhood is absolutely absurd." These personal biases above are direct examples of NIMBY mentality within individuals. When community members hold these biases, it's hard for anti-oppressive social workers to get projects like homeless shelters and affordable housing off the ground because they do not have full support of the community. In 2016, two First Nations men were denied provincial funding to stay overnight at the North Battleford Lighthouse homeless shelter and were instead offered a fast pass out of Saskatchewan. Rich Coleman, BC's Deputy Premier and Minister responsible for housing, confirms that government data indicates that homeless people from Alberta and Saskatchewan are arriving in the province in large numbers. Vancouver City Councillor Carrie Jang states that they have a policy that will actually deny people shelter. They have a policy that will put people on a bus and send them across the country without telling anyone. That's wrong. It appears that NIMBYism is associated with these practices, as provinces across Canada are helping individuals experience homelessness by sending them to another province with little to no instruction of what to do or where to go once they get there. Leading up to the 2010 Olympic Winter Games, the City of Vancouver put into fruition what critics call a cruel cleanup project in preparation to host the Olympics. In an attempt to clean up Vancouver's downtown east side, several key policies were added, amended, or enforced with the intent of presenting a safe, clean, and sanitized rendering of Vancouver during the 2010 Winter Olympic Games. Policies such as outlawing aggressive panhandling, criminalizing nuisance behaviors, and reducing street disorder and urban decay were initiated in preparation for and during the 2010 Olympic Games. These policies were used to validate the removal of people who threatened the projected image of Vancouver before and during the 2010 Olympic Games. This means that individuals experiencing homelessness were even further displaced because of the image the City of Vancouver was trying to project. The initiative, titled Project Civil City, promised to reduce homelessness by 50%. Not only did they severely fail, the rates of sheltered homeless increased significantly. Penty-Fallow concludes that Project Civil City's underlying objective of enhancing the city's image was upheld. However, the uptake in number of sheltered homeless indicates that homelessness, while on the rise overall, was increasingly less visible. At the individual level, personal biases shaped by negative stereotypes and limited knowledge about homelessness shape the beliefs society has about individuals experiencing homelessness as a whole. These beliefs then go on to shape societal norms, which influence the opinions of the communities in which individuals experiencing homelessness reside. These community ideals then influence larger institutional actions, which end up further displacing individuals experiencing homelessness because the programs and services created to offer non-judgmental, anti-oppressive help are pushed out of the communities or simply not approved in the first place. What does it look like when practitioners take up a critical approach to this field? Human services organizations try to create an anti-oppressive environment for marginalized populations, with their social work staff focusing on education and practice with homelessness. A study by Carabano found that anti-oppressive organizations allow for the emergence of meaningful and vibrant community settings by embracing grassroots social development, active participation, a structural analysis of the problem, consciousness raising, and social action, recognizing that there are ways in which practitioners can better approach their work with people experiencing homelessness, but this requires education and putting that knowledge into action. There can often be preconceived notions that people and practitioners may have that assume people experiencing homelessness are lazy or lack the motivation to find employment and get off the streets. In reality, people experience homelessness for a variety of reasons, including lacking mental health care, poverty, lack of affordable housing options, abuse, violence, substance abuse, and lack of needed services. Social workers can take a critical approach to dealing with homelessness at a variety of levels. 1. Micro, working with individuals and families daily to assist with resources and supports to help clients overcome their barriers and meet their basic needs. An example of a micro-level organization would be the Phoenix Residential Society in Regina, Saskatchewan. The Phoenix Residential Society provides psychosocial psychiatric rehabilitation services to those impacted by different cognitive disabilities and homelessness. 2. Meso, working with groups and organizations in the community to help fight homelessness, raise money for support efforts, and housing options to get homeless people back on their feet. For example, Carmichael Outreach in Regina offers a variety of different services to those experiencing homelessness. They receive donations that are monetary, food, clothing, and household items. The programs that the organization offers are housing support, food security, free clothing, children's needs, needle exchange program, and they also offer a life skills class. 3. Macro, working on a larger scale to create change at a government level. This includes advocating for change, petitioning governments for funding for further support programs, and working to develop new social policy to assist the homeless population. The Government of Canada initiated Reaching Home, Canada's homelessness strategy, in April 2019. The program aims to prevent and reduce homelessness in Canada and to support the most vulnerable Canadians in maintaining safe, stable, and affordable housing, and to reduce chronic homelessness nationally by 50% by the fiscal year 2027 to 2028. To properly assert what organization utilizes an anti-oppressive modality when approaching homelessness, it is imperative to establish what AOP is when working with this demographic. This concept is approached by Wilson and Beserford, who state that AOP is offered as an emancipatory approach to social work, committed to social justice, social change, emancipation, and taking the side of people who have been subjected by structural inequalities such as poverty, sexism, and racism. A local or Canadian organization that embraces a critical or anti-oppressive practice approach to this field. The Phoenix Residential Society in Regina, Saskatchewan utilizes an anti-oppressive model in its ambition of providing recovery-oriented services that foster empowerment, promote home, and build connectedness in the community. While they also support clients suffering from brain damage, the Phoenix Residential Society is designed to address the social intersections which may be influential towards people living without homes. To this effect, the Phoenix Residential Society has 3 programs designed to work against the structural inequalities, being the Housing and Others Management and Engagement Services Homes Program, the Centralized Housing Intake Process CHIPS, and the McEwen Manor, all of which work towards empowering the homeless community towards social change through various levels of engagement. The Homes and Chips program work in conjunction to offset social intersections contributing and provide programming to empower their client base. The CHIPS program is a process by which homeless individuals are assessed and prioritized for access to housing services and supports, and is done when clients are either referred through social agencies or self-refer. In its efforts of empowerment, the Phoenix Residential Society's Homes program aims to provide immediate access to housing for individuals who are chronically homeless, along with intensive support services once in housing. The Phoenix Residential Society Homes program clearly represents their commitment to an anti-oppressive model when reflecting on its 5 main principles. 1. Immediate access to permanent housing with no housing readiness requirement. 2. Consumer choice and self-determination. 3. Recovery orientation. 4. Individualized and client-driven supports. And 5. Social and community integration. In specific reflection of these points, the organization demonstrates an understanding of the power imbalance at play. They are affording for this power differential through the elimination of requirements to enter their housing and utilization of client-driven supports. Further, they are dropping the patriarchal facade of requiring a disenfranchised population to jump through hoops in their effort to receive aid, and realizing that in having certain contingencies to enter their housing, they would be perpetuating a perspective of oppression which may have influenced their clients' transition into homelessness and ultimately work against their ambition. In provision of programming designed to empower the homeless population, they are actively helping disenfranchised members of our community and working towards social justice. It demonstrates a recognition that this community may require aid and provides a means for this aid to be received while also recognizing the homeless individual's rights to autonomy and receive the aid on their own terms. While living in these situations, there is a variety of methods that the PRS utilizes to empower their clients, such as skills of daily living, life skills classes, food services, and other supports that may be determined by needs assessment and wellness plan, medication management, financial trustee services, addiction recovery services, and other service programs for high-need concurrent disorder clients are available on site. Focuses on long-term housing, improved quality of life, and concurrent disorders programming. The PRS recognizes that they can better empower the homeless population through the provision of adequate living facilities and programming to aid their clients that is individualized and client-driven. The PRS demonstrates their understanding of how the homeless population has been historically oppressed through their unrestricted access to housing, and that they understand that the homeless people may have been turned away from other housing centers due to issues with addiction and drug use. Understand that this demographic has historically had their power stripped away from them and work to empower them through programming and largely provide avenues to success for a population that has largely been ignored.